Be a survivor, not a statistic. Renegade River in Spring Lake has new and used handguns, hunting guns, sporting goods, and survival gear. Protect your rights and your freedom. Ask about their CPL classes. Renegade River, next to the police station in downtown Spring Lake. Renegade River in Spring Lake wants to buy your used handguns and hunting guns. Renegade River, your hunting, camping, and survival store. Stop in and check out their new and used firearms, sporting goods, Army and Navy supplies, and survival gear. Downtown Spring Lake, next to the police station.
News Talk 1090 is the talk of Muskegon.
Welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show. My name is Mike Hewitt, and today in the studio with me is Jim Riley, who is one of the co-hosts from the Talkin' Muskegon show in the morning.
That's me, one of the illustrious three, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for myself. Very,
very nice. And on the line with us today is Jana Konecki. Jana, welcome back to the Mike Hewitt Show.
Thank you.
Hey, just kind of a side note before we dive in, and it's a coincidence, Jana, but exactly 1 year ago this weekend, you were a guest on my show.
Interesting.
Yeah, when I was looking back for what we did, I kept going, and I thought, wow, it's the exact same weekend again. So it's kind of, I'm very happy to have you back. And for listeners, just to give a little background on who Jana is and why she's on the show today. You were born and raised and educated, had family in the Soviet era Russia, correct?
Right.
Okay, and
I was born in Siberia, and actually I lived all my life there.
I was always joked all my life whenever I got in trouble with my mother that the saying was she's going to send me to Siberia.
Well, it's not much worse than Michigan.
I see. So it really wasn't as significant of a threat as I always thought it was.
Right. This winter, I think Siberian winter was warmer, according to conversation with my mother there.
Imagine that.
Oh, my golly. You can imagine if the American news media got hold of that particular statistic.
Oh, that's too funny. Listen, the reason I wanted you back on the show, the first time you were on, we kind of talked about what it was like to be in Soviet-era Russia. But what I'm wanting today is the folks that are watching the news a lot here, at least in Michigan, and the folks that can hear our voice, have no doubt been paying close attention to the Ukraine and the Crimea situation and the war of words back and forth between President Putin and President Obama. And I thought that you probably have a unique perspective on this, especially with your family still there, and I'm imagining you have some kind of communication going on with them. And so with that in mind, that's kind of the topic for today. And I wanted to start out with something that I find a little bit fascinating. There was I think it was a letter or a notice that was sent out. Of course, I don't know who sent it, and I'm sure you don't either, but what it was suggesting is that the Jewish people that were 16 years of age and older had to register themselves, their assets, and so forth. And the way I understand it, that was written in Russian, but it was very poor Russian. Is that a true statement?
Well, whole letter was not bad, but I found few mistakes over there, and some mistakes were real crucial, especially in historical perspective, that Russians would, or even Ukrainian, in matter of fact, they would not make that mistake, because mostly it was connected historically with the name of Bandera, and I know that Americans don't know that name, but Russians and Ukrainians, and they know that name extensively because it was just in a recent history during Second World War.
I tried to find who would have been the author of it, and the best I could do was a tongue-in-cheek and suggest that whoever authored it maybe also helped Secretary of State Hillary Clinton with her reset speech.
Well, I'm not sure who did it, and I don't want, obviously, speculate. I just was very surprised with scale of it. Like, it was only 40 leaflets passed to the people. Nobody knows who wrote it. Nobody knows who passed it. And they actually spread like a fire in a west central, actually, all this media started with Jewish media, then in the U.S. media, and it was basically like mass hysteria that we have to save the Jews. It's like already pogroms started there, and we have to save them and send our troops over there. It's what it's basically came to, and I was just, it was just unbelievable to me how fast that mass hysteria can spread.
It did, and between the internet and media in general, it certainly had a lot of help. But when I put it in perspective, that letter came within a week of Putin, President Putin of Russia, talking about how the Ukrainians that have recently taken the new government of Ukraine, it's Nazi-like. He was suggesting that they were ultra right-wing extremists and Nazis, and at the same time, you had Hillary Clinton that was offered a kind of a little comment or a quip in an interview she was giving, and she suggested that Putin was like a Hitler. And so you have those two things, those two shots at each other as a backdrop to whoever authored that letter and then circulated it the way they did. So I find that fascinating, and I don't know if you can make sense of it or not, but...
Well, also by some sources which I checked, you probably have heard about conversation because it was caught on tape, conversation between Victoria Nuland and U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, how they were basically setting up puppet regime over there.
Right.
And that kind of was swept under the rug, and mostly it was concentrated on a F word, what she said about EU, rather than about changing regime over there.
When I look at Ukraine, and it's a little bit difficult for me to get my head around it, and let me try to lead into the conversation I wanted to have with you on this. I'm one of those guys who's a states' rights guy. I think that, I'll give you a flippant example. If the state of Washington wanted to secede and become part of Canada, and they did a fair and unfettered vote of the people, and that's what they elected to do, I would support them. Equally, if California wanted to secede and voluntarily annex itself to Mexico, I wouldn't know how wise it was, but if that's what they wanted to do, I think that's a part of a freedom of a free society. So when I try to get my head around what's going on in Ukraine, and then initially with Crimea, it looked like the overwhelming majority wanted to be part of Russia. Right. And I thought, who are we to stand in their way? But when I get into Ukraine, it's a little bit more difficult. And so what I did, and you can tell me if my thinking is right or wrong, but I went back to election results from Ukraine. In fact, I'm looking at a color map. It looks a lot like the USA Today map of our presidential elections, except for this one is set up for the Ukraine in 2004. And first off, I noticed that at least at the time, including Crimea, there was 26 regions or states. I don't know what they call their bodies or leaders of their units of government, but there are 26 of them. And the south eastern region of Ukraine is starkly different politically than is the rest of Ukraine.
Right, it's because they have ethnical actually roots more closer to Russia.
Okay.
So, and actually, it's why I wanted touch today Russian history over there and Ukrainian basically history, because people, especially those people who advocate put our troops, our U.S. troops over there, most of them, they don't know even where Ukraine is. And most of them don't know, for example, that Crimea was, it's legitimate in Sevastopol city, Navy base in Crimea.
Right.
It's a legitimate, basically, Russian Navy base because they paid for it. They listed for until 2042 this option with Ukraine, this option to extend lease until 2047. They have agreement that they can keep up to 25,000 troops over there. So to tell that Russian invasion of Crimea was illegitimate, it's insane, because they obviously could do it because they had a lease and they could put their troops on the ground there, especially protecting their Navy base. So, and it's one thing. And also, it is mostly Russian population over there. And when turmoil started in Crimea, I can understand that they did not want to do anything with that, and they wanted to go back to Russia. And it's repetition in the history, because before in the history was many, many times things like that. And actually, what happened, what Americans don't also understand, because difference between United States and how Russia and Ukraine was formed, it's based here, it was not based on oligarchy. Here, people came from some different places. They made one nation, Americans, and they actually did not have aristocracy, did not have all. It's like free new nation formed, basically. Whereas in Russia, it's always Ukraine and whole Europe, in the matter of fact. It was always oligarchy. And even democracy you can call oligarchy because it just changed under the rule of basically majority. But again, it's whoever ruled over you. It does not matter, king or majority, you're still under the rule.
Tell me this, am I thinking wrong when I say, Zhanna, that as I understand it, President Putin is enjoying a significant popularity in Russia. And I analogize it to if President Obama would defend our southern border, he would enjoy a dramatic increase in popularity. Am I thinking wrong here?
It would be insane for Putin to not put his troops on a border, and let's call it a Russian border because it's on a Russian border. They did not cross it to Ukraine. And it would be insane because if you look at the map, if NATO would take a Crimea, Russia would lose basically defense of the territory on the south, because Black Sea it's like a trap. If Russian fleet, Russian Navy cannot get out of that Black Sea without permission of Turkey, because of straits between Black Sea and Mediterranean Sea are very narrow, and even submarines cannot go unnoticeable. So it's every time they go in Atlantic from the Black Sea to military exercises, they have to announce to Turkey that they are moving to Atlantic. So it's basically that base, Navy base, it exists for just defending of Russian territory. And if it would be taken away, well, I don't know if people can visualize on a map. It's just on a footstep of the Russia, and it's very, very close to their border. If it would be the same thing, like, for example, well, it was once with that when Russia wanted to set up their missiles in Cuba, in a Bay of Pigs conflict. Americans were very upset about it, which was legitimate.
Well, let me ask you a question, Zhanna. It appears that the supporters, the Russian supporters, or the supporters of separation from the Ukraine and alignment with Russia, have taken control of many cities in eastern Ukraine. This is separate from the Crimea. They have also they've arrested, or at least in some way detained, a group that has been sent by the EU, the European Union, to come in and act as mediators and to look at the situation. I'm going to some of the websites. Actually, there's a quite a interesting Ukrainian website in English that you can go to on the web. But this is far beyond Crimea, and it appears from everything that I've read that most folks are pretty much in agreement with what you've said, in that the Crimea is almost for sure going to be aligning itself with Russia. But this new incursion, which has happened just in the last couple of weeks, and the taking over of the cities, the taking over of the radio stations and the television stations in eastern Ukraine, it appears to me that looks like about maybe 10% or even more of Ukraine may be splitting off and going into Russia. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, it's at the same map what Mike was looking at, map how they were voting. It shows the ethnical roots in Ukraine, because those regions, they are more Russian-leaning regions. But it's why I wanted actually to talk about history a little bit, because it's repeating itself. And history of that region, it's always control between basically European nations control over that region, or Russian Empire in that time control over that region.
Yeah, Jana, let me stop you for a minute. We're going to go to a break, and because we're up against a wall. But in the topic you're getting into, I don't want to cut it off in the middle of it, because it's probably the lion's share of what's really happening. So,
right,
folks.
Exactly.
Yep, folks. We'll be right back in just a couple minutes.
1090 WKBZ.
Welcome back to the Mike Hewitt Show. My name is Mike Hewitt. Jim Riley is in with me today, and we are on the phone with Jana Konecny, talking about the Ukraine and other matters in that area. Jana, when we went to break, you were just starting to touch on some history, and before you get going, answer me a real basic question, if I can. Right before the Soviet Union fell, where was Ukraine and Crimea? They were part of the Soviet Union, is that?
Yes, they were part of Russia.
Okay.
You're talking about Soviet Union, yes.
Yes, Soviet Union. Yes, so they were considered.
But what happened, actually, Rus, all history started in Ukraine. Because they started with Kiev Rus in 882. And it's like over than 1,100 years ago. Imagine if, for example, United States, instead of what it is right now, just put it in perspective. For example, all history of United States started along the Mississippi River. And all these different principalities as a states, like Missouri, Illinois, and Tennessee, Arkansas, they would form the basically. It was not like a country itself. It was all different, little the same, like states, principalities, with one center in St. Louis, for example, which was like Kiev.
Just help me understand something. I think I want to make sure I've got it. When you say that everything started in Kiev, are you referring to everything meaning Russia started in Kiev?
Russia.
Okay. So it grew out of Kiev.
Right. It was main prince was sitting in Kiev, and all these other principalities, if compare with United States, like Tennessee, Arkansas, Illinois, they would be like under. They were at the same time free principalities, but they had to pay certain duties and something to St. Louis, to Missouri. And in Missouri would be a main prince sitting at the throne, basically.
Now, given that history, Jana, I'm guessing that most of the folks that are in Russia right now are probably watching this very closely.
And so what happened afterwards, it's never been called Ukraine until just very recently, until I looked some facts, they are talking about 19th century. So before that, it was always called, it was basically called Russia. They maybe will say, oh, I am spreading, like even Ukrainians right now, they don't like that because they started actually word Ukraine originated from Russian word Ukraina, which means like outskirts. And because it was on the outskirts, because firstly, like I said, everything started with Kiev, Rus, but then it was a lot of turmoils with Tatar, Mongols, with Poland invasions, with other things. That main power of Russia shifted to Moscow. And in this case, if you would look at United States, it would be like New York, for example. So, and Kiev lost its power and its influence in that time. So everything shifted in Moscow. And actually, Kiev kind of was separated from Moscow and was torn in between Poland, Austro-Hungary, even between Turks on the south, and all history was based on that constant who is going to control that territory.
Yeah, I'm looking at a list of Jana. I'm looking at a list of dates, and it's just fascinating. And it goes to your point. It talks about Kievan of 882, the year 882, kingdom of 1199. But when you get into the 20th century, Western Ukrainian National Republic in 1918, Ukrainian SSR 1919. A different, I can't even say the word, but Carpatho, Ukraine?
Right, Carpatho, it's a mountains, right?
Yep, 1839, and then Soviet annexation of the Western Ukraine, meaning the Eastern was already part of Soviet Union, so they annexed the Western part. That's the part right now that wants to remain with the West, as I understand.
And I want to touch up with that.
Yeah, please do.
I want to just go a little bit. So, and what happened when actually it was Ukrainian intellectuals, they wanted to segregate their cultural heritage in the 19th century from ethnic heritage, and it's where word Ukraine appeared. Before that, they were mostly called like Little Russia, and Moscow region was called Great Russia. And all of these people, they're called still Russians. If you will look at people who came before revolution, like some writers and artists and so on, with their names is always one nationality is Russian. So they don't, in that time, they did not separate them on Ukrainians. So that is started, it just very, very recent, actually. It's like diversity, basically. It started in the 19th century.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's
separating these people into different nations. Yes, they did have a little bit different language. It's like because of, again, different region, again, Russian language, what is present right now, completely different from old Russian language. You cannot read old Russian language without translation.
Fascinating.
So because of so many years of all this, plus Ukrainians were influenced very much by Poland and Lithuania, so that gave them also differences in the languages.
They've got, I'm reading here, Jana, where it says that there are 18 different languages, and that the area that we know as Ukraine right now has changed hands or governments 8 times in the last 100 years.
Right.
That's pretty significant. That's turmoil.
More, I don't know, because what happened after, like in the 14th century, when Lithuania and Poland, they start expanding, and they actually took control over that region. And Moscow was in their part, and that Ukrainian part came under control of Poland and Lithuania, where in this region, mostly again, they were Russian people and they had an Orthodox religion. And Poland and Lithuanians brought to them Catholic religion, and all Russian population over there started getting oppressed, and obviously they wanted to oppress their religion. So it's like in everybody else, you know, in the history of England or something, people were running away from England with oppression of religion. It's how a lot of people came here in the United States, because their religion was oppressed in Europe. So, and people start actually fighting that, and at the same about period of time, it's where Kazakhs appeared, and many people know that word because they've heard it. And these actually Kazakhs, they start they start making deals with all these whoever will. They wanted to remain free nation. Basically, it was all peasants, militarized, and they wanted be free of servitude, because mostly in that period of time in any country, Poland, Russia, and so on, it started feudalism and started having serfs. These people wanted to just be free. And they start making deals with Poland or with Turkey or with Russia, make all different arrangements how they could be free. And one of when they were under Poland rule, they start making deals with Russia, and in 1600s, somewhere in the middle of 1600s, Kazakhs made it's like almost parallel with right now with Crimea. They had an election. They came together in their Rada, in the Zaporozhye Sech, and they decided to stay with Russia because it was mostly their culture and their language was closer, and they wanted to stay with Russia. So they made a deal that Russia will take, it's not exactly control, but what is it, sovereignty over that region, and they would be, but they would remain a free nation. Well, Russians kind of did not do it. They started doing also feudalism in that region, except actually Kazakhs remained free, and it was because they made deal with czars that as long as they will remain free, it's like they will have their militia, which will in a time of war, they would go and protect Russian borders. So, and in that period, actually, all serfs who lived in all regions of Russia, they would try, if they would try to escape, they would run to these places where Kazakhs live, because they were free zones of slavery, basically.
Zhanek, I've got a question. This is actually the history, to me, is fascinating, and how we got to where we are today. But right now, you have the leaders of the Ukraine with some seemingly half-hearted support from the United States and the European Union, saying that what the Soviet Union, what Russia is now doing, is wrong, illegal by international law and the like. But it looks like the Russians are prevailing in this. Why? I'll ask you two questions, and I don't know if we have time to do it before the break, but two questions. Why should we be interested, we being Americans here in North America, why should we be interested in the results of this? And is it possible that this situation with Russia expanding into other previously sovereign countries, is it possible that Russia will continue its expansion? Many of us who know about World War II have seen the same story using some of the almost identical phrases used by the Germans in the 30s. So two questions. Why should we be interested, and will they expand?
Okay, I kind of see expansion of European Union in the opposite direction. It's what I see right now because European Union is it's a socialist pact. It's what I only can call it. It has headquarters in Brussels, which right now all countries who joined European Union, they cannot make any. They're not free countries. They under Brussels control, and whatever Brussels will say them, they have to obey. So and now that expansion goes not to from Russian side to the Europe. That expansion goes from European Brussels side to the Russia. The expansions like they put NATO. Well, just imagine put arrows on a Russian border, and you would put arrows of NATO in all Baltic countries. You will put it in Poland. You will put it in Bulgaria and Turkey. And last corridor between Russian border and Europe, with all this NATO military there, it's Ukraine.
So,
if
Zhanna,
you will put that last arrow, you put Russia in a corner, and then from Russian positions, if you would be Russian leader of a country, what would you do?
So you're just to clarify, what you're telling us, in your opinion, is that Putin is actually defending against a European Union push.
Right, it's an expansion of European Union. It's what I see right now.
It
not goes opposite direction because they actually, that bloc, which was Eastern Bloc of socialist countries or communist countries, it's broke. Right now it's not exist. That pact, a military pact which existed between Soviet Union and Eastern European country, Warsaw Pact, it's broke. It's not exist anymore. But NATO is expanding, and European Union expansion goes, and it goes beyond because they're taking also Asian countries, as Turkey and those countries which formed from former Soviet Union, Uzbekistan, whatever, Kazakhstan, and so on.
Zhanna, do you think that, it goes to Jim's second question, do you think that countries like Poland are in play right now from either the European Union side or Putin pushing back?
I don't know.
Okay, that's fair. They appear to be, at least from the media, and let me dovetail a comment here. Talking to you today is very refreshing because what you're telling me is a lot of the whys to what I'm watching on TV, but the TV, the media, and what's coming out of the Washington, D.C., to me, I know that I'm not listening to the truth. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it's difficult for me to understand what's what. But from what it appears, the leaders of Poland are very afraid. They're moving militarily. They're doing exercises with the U.S. military as a show of who knows what. But that's why I asked the question. So.
Right. And as far as already history, which is already closer to our time, again, all of it was you just could see by old history that it was constantly turmoil between Russia and Poland, Austro-Hungary, Germany, and they were all over fighting for that particular territory, as well as Russia had it was like 12 wars for Crimea with Ottoman Empire and Turkey. So for that region also. And and just before the First World War, actually, Russia had part of Poland right now, Finland. They had all Baltic countries. They had Ukraine, Moldova, and even some part of, in the south, in the Caucasus, all these countries like Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, but also some part of Turkey. And that changed significantly with the Brest-Litovsk Pact when Soviets, Lenin insisted on that pact when they lost 1 million square miles of territory to Germany, and they lost 60 million of people for that pact. And what was done, it was Finland was separated from Russia and went under basically German control. They told that it would be the free nation, but it was, again, because it was World War I, and it was just switching influence between which country is controlling which territory.
Jean, I'm going to stop you there. We're going to go to our final break, and we'll be right back on that note.
Okay, sounds good.
Welcome back to the Mike Hewitt Show. I'm Mike Hewitt, and with me is Jim Riley, and on the phone is Jana Konecny. But listen, I promised myself I wouldn't forget today. And so before we get back into the topic, just a couple real brief things. First off, this show, the Mike Hewitt Show, now has a website called themikehewittShow.com. And on it, you'll find past episodes and notes, and there's a way to contact me by telephone or by email. And it's kind of a neat. It's a new site, but it's growing pretty quick. It's actually starting to take visual great shape. So enough of that. I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned
it's well worth visiting. As I have experienced, new websites tend to be glitchy. We may have heard of the President Obama had something called Obamacare, and his site was kind of glitchy. This site is really worth the effort. So, yeah, great site, and it's worth the visit.
I was going to ask Obama to step in and help me, but I thought I'd better not. So,
well, the people in Oregon got some free time. You might want to contact them.
There's a thought. Hey, John, listen, I know that you've been very upfront about the fact that knowing and understanding all of the caveats that are going on now is difficult. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but having said that, just in our last little bit, can you see of a way, or maybe does your family related of a way to try to reduce the tensions and back away? Because just from my vantage looking in, it looks like you've got the Ukrainian military mounted on one side of a border. You've got the Russian, a fairly large contingency of the Russian military on their side of the border. Forgetting for a moment who's defending whom or who's right and who's wrong, I see the United States has put people in Poland now with the and I'm understanding that we've got advisors that have been sent to help
right,
the.
It's with the tragedy of situation because people it does not matter. They will be living under again control. They are not getting free. In any case, it's what tragedy. I would be glad to see if Ukrainian people would be free, but it's a choice between the European control or Russian control. And obviously, whoever on the Russian side and Russian-speaking people, they afraid of being that they're going to be actually suppressed by Ukrainian-speaking people and Ukrainian oligarchy. They want to stay with Russia. Ukrainian part of population, and I don't know, also and mostly it's look like. So some of them, they want to stay with European Union. So it's a tragedy of situation because for people, I don't see any relief.
Right. Let me ask you this: and let me put my slightly libertarian hat on for a moment. If it were me, I think the fairest way for it to be. I'm looking at these 26 principalities that make up Ukraine. There are 25 now. Crimea already gone. If it were me, I had a magic wand. I'd tell all the militaries to go home and roast marshmallows, and I would tell each one of these principalities to have a vote. And if you want to stay with what would become the new Ukraine, great. And if you want to go to Russia, great. Make it happen. And then let's draw a line in the sand once and for all and call it done.
Right.
Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's the direction it's going to head in. And there's a lot of angst or fear that this is not Putin defending himself against the EU, but rather Putin being aggressive and on the warpath. With the, I understand you don't know these things. You've been here,
Right.
not
And,
there.
On the other hand, this Russian-speaking population, they are saying that they don't want to go to the supporters of Bandera, which is it's how they call it's. Bandera is gone. Obviously, he was during Second World War, but his followers. So they told that we don't want to be under that rule, and we don't want Europeanization of our nation. So,
as far as you know, Zhanna, when I listen to President Putin describe the government in Ukraine, the new government that took over in here, I think February. I don't know, and you may not be aware of this, which is fine, but when Putin describes them as being right-wing extremists, for me, that is such an echo chamber for here in the United States. I support fiscal responsible constitutional government, and as such, I'm considered a right-wing extremist.
well,
So when I hear that term, I kind of push it away.
It's a different concept. It's a totally different concept.
Right.
Yes.
Help me understand it if you could. I mean, in terms of what's he saying when he's calling them a right-wing extremist?
Extremism, well, it goes to the part of the Bandera. Its word is they call extremism because well, they had during Second World War they had that figure in Ukraine. Which Stepan Bandera, who was educated, I think, in Poland, and when he returned back, and he was from western part of Ukraine, and when he returned back, he wanted to fight for independence of Ukraine, so-called, but to do it, he wanted to unite with German Nazis. The German Nazis, they actually kind of made double deal. Nazis, they thought that they could use it, and Bandera thought that he could use Nazis.
I'm reading that as you say that. Yep. I'm reading that as you're describing it. I'm reading Ukrainian collaboration with Axis powers.
Right.
So exactly what you're saying.
Right. And they start forming organization of independent Ukraine, I guess, or something. And I have to look how they call it. So, but organization of Ukrainian nationalists.
Right.
So, and it's split on two routes, actually. One was wanted to, because it's happened in the Soviet Union when they returned. Remember, I was talking about Brest-Litovsk peace treaty where Russia lost of 1/3 of their territories, actually. And just before the Second World War, they had another treaty, which is a very famous one, where Russia gained back that territories. It was in 1939 when Soviets made a treaty pact with Nazis. And so in that period, Ukraine and some Poland territories actually were signed under Soviet Union in that time control. And it's where that Stepan Bandera appeared. He wanted to actually make deals with Nazis that they would control that territory, where his opponent or something, and he wanted to do it revolutionary way. So, and other opponent, he wanted to do more peaceful way with already rulers who ruled that time, which is Soviet Union, actually. And Bandera, he formed some military camps where they trained people how to do revolt. So it's what actually what Putin refers to these people, because they actually, it's kind of followers of that movement and followers of Bandera. It's why in Russia they call them Banderovцы.
Jana, I've got to stop you because we're out of time. So one last question. Mm-hmm. I understand that in the 4th Congressional District there's a congressional race going on.
Right.
Are you going to make an endorsement of anybody in that race?
Yes. Obviously, I will endorse my husband, Peter Konechi.
Jana, listen, I'm going to get you back on again as this Ukrainian thing develops, but I need to let you go because we're out of time. And,
okay.
And I appreciate you very, very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Mr. Riley.
Yes, I'm here.
What did you think?
Well, I think it's fascinating. Again, history matters. The unfortunate thing is that you have two armies facing each other. And
whose side are you on?
After listening to Jana, I don't know whose side I'm on. I'm on the side of this not expanding into a bigger war. But as you have mentioned, the First World War got started in seemingly innocuous events. The Second World War also. And the history tells me that allowing thugs and brutal dictator KGB types to get away with small things does quite often lead to bigger things.
I got to tell you, I think that's true, but I can't figure out which sides are the thugs. You could take the people right now that are representing or announcing themselves as pro-Russian, and they're holding emissaries from other countries hostage. And you go, well, are you a thug or are you a good guy? Who are you? It gets really murky.
It is very murky, and that's the unfortunate point, because you've got political there are winners on either side trying to push stories that may or may not be true.
The good news, though, is President Obama is going golfing, and so he won't get us screwed up on the wrong team, right?
At this point, what difference does it make?
Wow. So, if you tell me one last thing. Did you see your picture on the MikeHewittShow.com?
Yes, I did, and it was fantastic. Well worth a visit.
I like it. Folks, we'll talk to you next week. Have a great week.
Brought to you by Renegade River.